Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Home Tech. I'm Seth Johnson, joined as always by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Seth. How are you?
Good. I had a great interview tonight with a friend of the show, Nathaniel Gori, who submitted a really cool project a while back, and we finally got him on the show. And I don't know, it was a really good interview. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. I'm really, the project, Seth. I got to take my hat off to you. Was your brainchild, and it's been a lot of fun. I think I always really enjoy bringing manufacturers onto the show, and I think they bring a very valuable perspective to our episodes here. But really getting people on there that are out there actually putting their hands on this stuff, every day, and especially someone like Nathaniel, who's not a professional, similar to episode 172 we did recently with David Millsaps, was another episode like this where you're talking about two gentlemen out there who don't work in the smart home for a living, but have clearly done their homework and really charted a path forward for their own smart home projects in a very intelligent way, and it's really cool to hear about. And I think our listeners will really enjoy this one, particularly if you liked episode 172, you'll really enjoy this one as well.
Yep. Well, we've only got a couple more weeks. It's mid-August, and so that means Cedia is right around the corner. Jason, are you ready?
Of course, 100%. We're dialed in.
Yes,
we got everything figured out. We got our feet kicked up, and we're just waiting casually.
Yes. Same thing is going on mine end, and I don't even have anything to show at Cedia. I'm trying to get stuff ready to show at Cedia, and press releases and all that good stuff, but. Man, there is no time left. It is crunch time,
yep.
And there's no time left and so much to do.
Yeah, it's we're definitely busy at One Vision. We're looking forward to a good show, and it'll be a lot of fun. As I've said every year in the past that we've been doing this show, I think, this will be our third or fourth Cedia now since we started doing the podcast, and I always look forward to it. It's one of my favorite. Well, it's definitely my favorite industry event, to get everyone together and get sort of reinvigorated about the industry and see what's new and what's going on out there. This will be my first year on the vendor side, which will be interesting. I apologize. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold this week, so my voice is fighting me a little bit. But yeah, it'll be my first year on the vendor side, which will be really, I think, an interesting experience. Speaking of that, I did want to give a quick shameless plug here on the podcast for a couple of workshops that we'll be hosting out in San Diego. And these are, I won't go into all the details. We'll include a link to them in the show notes at HomeTech.fm/175. But, the short version is if you're either just getting started or maybe you've tried before and have sort of failed or not really gotten the traction that you wanted to with new service strategies inside of your integration business, we've got a couple of really great workshops that we're going to be teaching out there I really feel like you'll come away with some actionable insights and some really good information that you can go back and apply right away to your own business and really get some forward progress when it comes to implementing these new strategies in your business. So definitely head on over to HomeTech.fm/175. If you're interested in learning more about those, we'll include a link where you can go read some full descriptions, and would encourage you to take a minute and sign up if you're going to be there. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, definitely go to these. And I'm over here laughing because you're there plugging these awesome workshops that are great for anybody who is interested in taking their business to the next level. And my next note on here is plug the Home Tech Happy Hour. you can see where our priorities lie.
Right.
So I'd like to remind everybody to go over to the website and sign up for the One Vision workshops, but also sign up for the Home Tech Happy Hour that we've got a little link at the top of the website at HomeTech.fm. You can go in there, click on the link, fill out the form, let us know you're coming. It's really kind of helped. I guess we're starting to get a good count. I think this is probably the last week I'm going to pay attention to that, and then we're just going to kind of move forward and say, this is where we are. We've only got a couple more, looks like 2 more shows in between here and there, and one of them is actually our prediction show. Jason, I'm looking on here, Oh, you've got one on here now. You've got a prediction.
I've got one.
All right.
Well, sort
All
of
right.
one. I've got the seed, the seed of one. I haven't quite made my prediction yet, but we'll see. We'll get there. I'll have some, Seth. I promise.
Excellent. Well, Home Tech Happy Hour and the One Vision workshops, go sign up for them. They're both are definitely going to be worth it. So HomeTech.fm/175 will get you to the show notes where we'll put links for both of those in there. We've got a pretty cool pick of the week, courtesy of the Hub, which is our private Slack channel for our patrons of the show. Anybody who has decided to go on Patreon and support the show gets an invite over to the Hub. And James Radcliffe, friend of the show, James Radcliffe has posted what I think is a really cool install. He's got like this massive floor to ceiling mirror TV set up, and he posted it with #nervous, which I thought was hilarious. and I'm going, what is that? And then he said, it's a huge, fragile, heavy, bendy, expensive two-way mirror with a TV in it. But now it's done, and I can relax. And man, I would be so nervous putting that in, right? Like that thing looks like it is.
It's a beast.
Yeah, it's huge. I can't imagine how much that weighed.
Yeah, I've done in my recent history as an integrator, done a couple of those big custom Sierra TVs, and they're always very nerve-wracking and very expensive and time-consuming to replace, and so you don't want to make a mistake. And there's a ton of coordination that goes into getting the pocket framed out and dialed in the way that you need it. And you got to really work closely with your general contractors and often your electricians. And man, there's just a lot that goes into that. People see the finished product with things like this, and it's very cool and, very sexy. And we love all that. But yeah, it's really hard unless you've done it before to really appreciate all of the project management time and engineering time that goes into properly executing one of these. So if you're not familiar with what this installation looks like and what sort of the process behind the scenes looks like, obviously we're going to have one or two pictures. It's not going to do justice to the whole thing, but it'll give you a sense for what's involved. Very, very cool picture. So I want to thank James for submitting that.
Yep, absolutely. And if you do have a pick of the week or a suggestion for the pick of the week, we are trying to do this. We're trying to make it a thing. Submit it to us on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast. We'll gather them all up together. And Jason and I typically look at them and figure out which one we want to put up for the week before the show. And here we are. So submit it on our website, HomeTech.fm/feedback, or over on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we've teased our interview here, so definitely stay tuned for that. And like we normally do, we're gonna tee up a number of smart home news stories here momentarily. Before we do that, I want to give a quick thanks. Seth, you alluded to it very briefly there, but I want to give a quick thanks, as we always do, to our patrons of the show. If you're interested in learning more about how you can support our efforts here at the HomeTech Podcast, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. And that's where you can learn about our Patreon program, which is a way that you can support our efforts here at the podcast for as little as $1 a month. We've got a bunch of people doing that now, and we really, really appreciate it. So big thank you to all of you who've done that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to echo that thanks, and thank everybody for also contributing over at HomeTech Live, which is our IRC channel that's kind of linked to our HomeTech Live Slack channel. There are a lot of people in here tonight causing a lot of a ruckus. So definitely want to
it's great.
thank everybody for tuning in live and yelling at us over here in the chat. I'm watching the stuff scroll by. It's these guys are being funny tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely fun when we get some involvement there. And like I said, head over to HomeTech.fm/support. Even if you just contribute at that $1 a month level, we'll send you an invite to our private Slack channel. But I should mention that even if you're not a patron of the show, you can participate in the live chat room by heading over to HomeTech.fm/live. We typically record on Wednesday nights around 7:30 Eastern, sometime around there. It varies a little bit. But if you're interested in participating in that live chat room, anyone can do that. Once again, HomeTech.fm/live is the way to to go about that.
Yep. Well, the big story this week that I saw all over the place was a story from I saw this all over, from a company called LockState, who accidentally sent out a firmware update to all of their smart locks and bricked them, every single one of them. Whoops.
and, and I think just about every tech blog that you could possibly imagine reported on this, and I think they were probably falling all over themselves to break the story first. It definitely is a catchy headline, and I think probably just about everybody with any interest in the smart home clicked through and read the story, and really unfortunate. Don't know anything about the company, I have to admit. LockState, I hadn't heard of them prior to the story. It sounds like Tuesday, August 8th is when they sent out this update, bricked, a bunch of them, but really was only one model. Apparently one LockState product was affected, the LockState Remote Lock 6i, also known as the 6000i. Apparently this is not a product common to the everyday smart home enthusiast, is what I'm understanding. Very focused on the Airbnb market, which is kind of interesting. So, they're selling these locks to Airbnb renters as a convenient means to manage their renters and not have to deal with physical keys, which, makes a lot of sense. And Richard in the chat room is saying they're mostly a commercial line other than that. So really unfortunate, like I said. I'm sure there were a lot of Airbnb hosts who were really put out by this and had to kind of go out of their way to put out some fires. And so hopefully the company can make good on it as quickly as possible and get people back on track.
Yeah, it looks like they have really tried. They've got two options. There's to fix the locks. Somebody will have to send in the physical device, so the software can be updated, and that can take between 5 and 18 days, depending on what option you select. So yeah, it doesn't sound good for these customers who have a smart lock that is no longer smart. But it's, this isn't the first time this has happened. Like, the Wink actually did this to their hub a couple of years ago and bricked pretty much all of their hubs to the point where you had to either send it in or they did a little trick with some of the network settings where they could implement a fix that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the same fix here for these locks. It looks like you have to go ahead and send them back. So sucks to be this company, but these things happen. This isn't like the first time this has ever happened. And I guess it's getting headlines because it's a smart lock more than a kind of small home automation hub. But I don't know. These things can and will continue to happen as long as we're putting computers in all these tiny little devices. If they get a bad firmware update, or they get some in Wink's case, it was a certificate that expired, and all of a sudden their devices can't check in anymore. That's going to be a problem. So somebody's going to have to. There's going to have to be some way to take care of these things, and it looks like LockState is going to be spending a lot of money on postage. So sending these devices back and forth.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Guillermo in the chat room is astutely pointing out, it's kind of the part of the reality of having a smart device. It is one of the inherent risks that you do take. Worth noting, if you did have like this product in your home, right? If you were just more of a quote unquote normal user, smart home user, physical keys did of course continue to work, right? So always worth having that option. Of course, that defeats like a lot of the purpose of having a smart lock. If you're a typical user, the real reason that you even put one of those in the first place, so you don't have to carry a key around. But ultimately, the broader point still stands that this is really part of the reality of having a smart device, and you have this sort of underlying inherent risk involved that something is going to go wrong, and you just got to kind of take the good with the bad, I suppose.
Yep. I mean, TJ actually brought up an interesting point in our Slack. This could be any computerized device. This is any device really that you have that's automated. Like your computer could have something go wrong with it, a bad update, and you'd have to bring it into the Apple store to have it fixed. So I think this this just got a lot of heads turning because it's a lock. It's a device that's not typically smart. Like it's a device that most people are very familiar with. Everybody has these on their homes, and for one to stop working magically because of some internet bits and bytes that were sent incorrectly to it, that doesn't make people are scared. They don't understand this thing, but the reality is any computer this could happen to. And it happened here. It's going to happen again. I kind of rolled my eyes when I saw the story roll through everywhere, because it's gonna happen. Like, we're putting computers in things these days. Those computers will break eventually, and then you can't be shocked when that
Very
happens. It's going to be silly. It's going to be silly to keep being shocked by all of this stuff. Moving forward, I think at some point I'm just going to get tired of these types of stories where things break and people are shocked that a computer could crash.
Yeah. Fair point. Well, let's move on here. We want to touch on this story in case anybody out there only read the headlines this week. IKEA is not yet supporting HomeKit, and I'll explain here. So, IKEA's got their trod-free smart lighting system, which we've talked about on a number of occasions. It actually looks like a pretty compelling product for a number of reasons. We won't necessarily dive into all of those, but some headlines surfaced this week, and I definitely they caught my attention. I clicked through on them, and it said IKEA's got HomeKit support. They're rolling it out. Some of them mentioned Google Home and Alexa. Seth, you'll get that in post. I know Richard's tuned in tonight, so hopefully he's got his Alexa muted, but. Turns out that IKEA, the way that I'm reading the story, actually, I think they just maybe weren't careful enough with their words in a firmware update. So that what happened is, they've always had support for all three of those systems slated for release in the fall of this year. So coming up, presumably in a few months. But what they did is they rolled out a firmware update, and as part of the firmware update, they put in the notes, update your firmware here to support the following voice control platforms, right? And they named them all out. Well, that led a bunch of people naturally to believe that firmware update was the update that they were ready to roll. Well, for one reason or another, I don't know if that comment wasn't supposed to be in there at all, or if this was a firmware update maybe laying some groundwork. I'm not a developer. I don't know how those things work, but they weren't ready. So a bunch of people reported on it. I think 9to5Mac was the original one who reported on it, and very quickly had to put out an update saying, wait, IKEA jumped the gun. We don't have the support, but they're still on track to support it in the fall. So kind of an interesting reporting sequence there. And if you were following that, I wanted to make sure we included that in this week's episode, in case I know sometimes I'm guilty of it too. We scan through the tech headlines and that's about it, all we have time for. Well, it turns out there was a little bit more to this story.
Yeah. And, this IKEA Trodfee system, I've been looking into it and how it's communicating on the back end. There was a story we covered a couple of weeks back about someone getting one of these DIY systems getting integration with it. And I think Home Assistant, maybe? I'm not sure. One of them had a little update that came through and they said, oh, we're integrated with Trodfee. Well, I started digging in and trying to figure out how they were doing that. And it looks like there's been a heavy amount of reverse engineering to basically talk directly to the hub that controls all of the lighting devices. And they say it's actually pretty easy. It's a pretty standard service that they're using. So they'll this little product, I think we're going to be shocked as to how many people get this. I was kind of bearish, I guess. When they first came out, I didn't think that, honestly, I didn't think that it would do well. I've heard all this talk about how they're going to revolutionize the retail around it, and I always rolled my eyes at that, because when I went to IKEA, that section where lighting is, it's just like mayhem.
Little end cap.
There's carts. No, it's not an end cap. It's like a giant section with lighting.
Oh, right.
And LEDs flickering over here, and it's like there's people everywhere, and I've rarely ever seen anybody that works for IKEA in that section. So, and I'm just wondering how their retail is going to be any different than any other box store. But the thing is, they're going to be there, and you're going to be able to put them in the little, shopping basket that you have in front of you for really, really cheap prices. I think these were like under $20 for a smart light bulb. That's going to make some more inroads and bring some more customers, home technology customers in than I was initially thinking. Now that I see all that they're trying to do, all the products they're bringing on, and everything that they're doing, I think these guys are really doing it right. From like the low, I say low end, but like from maybe apartments, a dorm room that wants lighting control, like bringing all of those price points in. These guys are going to take over that market fairly quickly. I think they've got quite a bit going for them.
Yeah, no, I think they're certainly in a good position for a lot of very obvious reasons. One being, just the sheer volume that they can do. There was a really actually interesting story we'll link to on Wired.com about this, and Wired does some great reporting. I don't often get like breaking news stories from there, but if you're into the smart home, they're worth following. Especially for some of the sort of thought leadership and opinion pieces that they put out around the smart home. And they had a great one out this week about just this, exactly what you were saying, how IKEA is in a great position to really make waves in the smart home and really come at it from a different angle. And, a lot of the article, I have to say, from my perspective as somebody who really follows the smart home regularly, maybe I'm not their target audience per se, but a lot of it was sort of fairly obvious and, things we've heard a million times over. Manufacturers got to make it simpler, cheaper, do the messaging better, make consumers understand the value proposition. We know that. A lot of us know that, we get that. But still, there was some really, I thought, insightful commentary in this piece around what was really described as kind of a refreshingly modest approach by IKEA. They're really not coming into the market trying to be everything to everyone. They're not trying to overreach and do too much, and really just coming out with a very simple offering and seeing where it goes. And I think you're right. I think they're very well positioned to, do well with the line. And one of the thoughts I came away from the piece with was going back in my mind to 2014 when every company out there was trying to release a hub, right? That was the big thing. You had companies like Staples, an office supply store, is a great example, getting into trying to be sort of that platform for the smart home. And you contrast that with what IKEA is doing, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm reading through that article. This kind of stood out to me. Over 900 million people pass through the doors of IKEA's 400 stores each year.
Yeah,
that's incredible to think about. 900. I think they all actually on Saturday end up at the one in Tampa at once. But the thing is, if a fraction of those 900 million people pick up a single light bulb and hub and walk out the door with what they think is a toy, that's somebody who's interested in the smart home or interested in an aspect of the smart home that may not have been before. So I think this is just it's one of those things that is going to bring so much awareness from an area, from a market that I think was actually underserved. Like most of the people that would go in and buy this would probably look at Philips Hue and say, oh, I'd like that. And then they look at the price tag and say, maybe not. But with what these guys are introducing at the price point, if it works well and there's a quality build to it, which for the most part IKEA is pretty good at. I think we have a home run here for them. So 900 million people. Wow. That's crazy.
Anthony in the chat room points out, half of those are husbands with their eyes glossed over, but even at that, Anthony,
at the point you get into the basement of that thing, you're done with shopping there. It's like, let me leave. I had meatballs halfway through, and I need to go. I just need to leave.
Show's over. The show is over. All right, well, let's move on here. We've got a Z-Wave story, Seth. I'm going to let you tee this one up. You discovered this one, and it's actually this is actually fascinating.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Yeah, there is there's the zwavealliance.org website. If you go to it, there is a you can search for different products. You can kind of select the manufacturer. You can just basically search for any manufacturer that makes a Z-Wave product, and it'll show you all the products they make that are Z-Wave certified. Well, somebody sent this to me. Search for Control 4, and when you pull up Control 4, they have a little note here on their instruction manual for their Z-Wave control modules. And I'm just going to read here what that says. This Control 4 Z-Wave module has been engineered to run on Control 4 systems with EA controllers 1, 3, or 5, and the CA1 controller running OS 2.9.0 or later. Very interesting because we don't really know what the Control 4 CA-1 controller is. The only ones they list on their website are the EA controllers 1 through 5. So we may have an interesting CEDIA this year. If Control 4 introduces a new controller, that would blow me away. And it certainly sounds like they might. I really wonder. EA stands for the entertainment and audio. I wonder what CA stands for.
Yeah, so you heard it here first. I think we may have our first official home tech news leak ever. So episode 175. Mark that one down. Fascinating. I don't know how this could be a typo. I mean, my initial thought would be, well, if they typed like a C instead of an E, and they meant to type EA1, but that doesn't work because they mentioned EA1 like literally 5 words before they mentioned CA1, right? So I don't think it's a typo, and who knows? CEDIA is right around the corner. I too, like you, Seth, would be surprised if they released a new controller already. I mean, the EA1s are not that old by as these things go. I think they released those a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. My memory's not the greatest, but it's a relatively new line in any sense. So I don't know. Really interesting. I'll be curious to see what this shapes up as. But looks like we may have a new Control 4 controller coming up here.
Yeah, it will be cool to see. I really would. I'm trying to figure out what the C stands for. There's Greg in the chat is saying it's Canada. But
Canada.
I don't think that's what it is. I wonder if the C stands for control and automation. I don't know. It can't be control and automation. But it's interesting that it has the -1 after it. Like that signifies to me, I guess that signifies as like a baseline controller. And it may be that this is like a controller that doesn't have any of the audio stuff built in, like the EA product line does.
That was going to be my guess.
Maybe it's just like a standalone Control 4 controller with no AV on it, which would be a big departure for them, So they have always had the controllers with the output for video and audio on them, so you could get the on-screen navigator. And if this is Control 4, maybe moving a little product down market, that would be very, very interesting because everything we've seen out of them and all of their purchases that they've done indicated that they were moving up market. And if they come out with something that is less expensive, who knows? This thing could be like $5,000 and way more expensive than the EA5. But I suspect that it looks like it's probably a down market type device. So we'll have to see, man. This really. I know some things that are happening with Control 4. I did not know this one. This one kind of took me by surprise.
No, it was a great find. If I had to guess, like if you forced me to make a guess right now, I would say the C stands for control, and I would say that they're stripping the entertainment elements out of it. So namely audio, possibly even like IR outputs for, because those are really used for TVs and cable boxes and things. And this could be a very stripped down controller at a very low price point designed to compete more with the likes of Smart Things or something along those lines. That would be huge. Guess.
That would be awesome.
Now we are clearly, I'm going to hedge because we're clearly in the world of pure speculation at this point. I have absolutely no idea what the CA1 is. But like I said, if you force me to guess, that would be That would be my guess.
I'm not going to force you to guess, but I'm going to force you to put that prediction over on our prediction show so we have something.
Well, this one was too easy. I mean, you teed this one up for me. So there you have it. Call that my first prediction.
Well, we can guess on what that C stands for between now and Cedia. But it will be interesting. I think it's with this. If this is something that they're going to announce at the show, I think they're going to have a really good show this year. From all the other stuff that I do know that is kind of leaked out through other means, but this is public, so I felt that we had to point this one out.
Well, except for all of the dealers out there who are gonna, gripe and complain. Oh, C4 is moving down market and blah blah blah. It's the whole GAFA story, right?
Right.
Bruno was right.
Well, and so I think you made mention of this, so I'll give this to you for our Cedia show. The Bruno was right will be the constant theme that we're going to be hammering on through the entire.
That's going to be the biggest meme of Cedia this year. Exactly. I guarantee it.
So Bruno was right, and I am definitely going to be making those GAFA T-shirts that I was teasing there in the show, the Slack channel. So if you saw those, it was kind of a fun play on a familiar logo. And if you want a GAFA shirt, make sure you come to the Home Tech Happy Hour, because that's the only way you're going to get one.
That's it. That's a limited release.
Yeah, very limited, because I don't know if anybody's looked at how much T-shirts cost to make.
Yeah, we're on a shoestring budget here at the Home Tech Podcast, but we'll have some fun with that. Let's move on to the next story here. We want to talk a little bit about the OTT market, Seth. I think, we need a new term for that. It always feels very awkward to say that, over-the-top video. I don't know if you've got anything better right now. SVOD is one I saw this week, streaming video on demand. Feels a little bit better, but in any event, we're gonna jump in and talk about that. Story here that cable and satellite companies are getting ready to post their worst quarter ever. Now, we talked about a story not too long ago where these companies had lost north of 750,000 subscribers in the first quarter of 2017. Well, it looks like that number is going up to 941,000 subscribers in the second quarter of this year, which is a staggering number. Almost 1 million subscribers fleeing the traditional pay TV market, and presumably a lot of these customers are heading to SVOD solutions like Hulu and YouTube TV, and there's a bunch of others out there, Sling TV, Direct TV now. We've seen a ton of growth in that market, and I think it really has become one of the biggest stories of the year in my mind, and we're continuing to see that trend. And I don't think it's going to slow down. I really think that these traditional pay TV companies are finally at a place where they've got real market pressure pushing them to adapt. I don't think that they will, because I think, frankly, these numbers are probably, in the grand scheme of things, not hurting these companies badly enough now. But you are seeing them start to respond with streaming solutions of their own, and the market will tell how well those work. But man, this is fascinating. That is a lot of subscribers moving away from what has been a really entrenched industry.
Right. And it, like you said, it's getting worse. And I mean, we talk about this. We get these numbers almost every week. It's like, well, partly because this entire industry was set up around numbers. Like they get ratings for every 15 minutes and rate pay their show hosts and stuff based on the ratings they get. So like we can get numbers for these cable subscribers and viewers and all that stuff fairly easily. Like that's not very hard. But it seems like we're talking about this every week. This is something that's just rolling and rolling even faster and faster now. I don't know how long it's going to be until cable TV really has nowhere to go. Like I'm having friends call me and ask me, hey, do you know about Kodi? And I'm like, how the heck you're like, what do you know about Kodi? And they're like, oh, I set it up on my Amazon Fire Stick that they picked up for $40, and now they're trying to like download illegal movies. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to help you with that. Like I do believe in paying for something. So when it comes to like getting free movies, I really don't know too much about that stuff, believe it or not. Like I'll pay for movies. I'll pay for the TV shows that I want to watch. So not a big deal. Greg's in the yes, Greg. Wow,
that's funny.
That's very timely, Greg. I can see that you've been watching American news, but he said, "Don't call it Cody, call it illegal TV streaming." You know what? That's what it is. So it is illegal. You probably shouldn't do it, and I don't know. I can see like borrowing a movie and from a friend and watching it on your system and then giving it back or something like that. But these systems that are set up to mass in mass to send out video and copyright material, I'm not all for that. What I am for is making it super easy for people to get that content. And I think we're slowly seeing them do that, although what they're doing is so fragmented right now. I think it's turning a lot of people off, and they're looking for a solution that's all in one. And that's where you see kind of like another frustration come up that we'll have here in the future.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The the traditional. I apologize for my voice this week, guys. The traditional landscape for a viewer who was looking for an alternative to an expensive cable TV package was very limited, right? And that, I think, either directly or indirectly drove a lot of people towards these sort of illegal or quasi-legal solutions. Now, you could get into a whole conversation about the morality of that and whether or not you support it. And, I get it. We don't really want to go there. That's not the intent of our conversation. But I think the broader point is that the more and more companies make purely legal, paid solutions available, the more consumers will gravitate towards them, right? Like you look at music went through sort of the same thing. Like when Napster really came out, there was no other solution. And then iTunes came out and you could actually go pay 99 cents for a single song instead of buying an entire album. And there's a lot of parallels there. So yes, I think that there are people out there who are going to use these free, blatantly copyright violating solutions, and you're never going to get around that. But I do think those are probably the minority. And I think the vast majority, in my opinion, of people, I don't have the numbers to back this up, but I think the vast majority of people would be fine paying a little bit for a solution if it was a reasonably priced alternative to traditional cable, and they could get what they want to watch and not have to pay for 300 channels that they never use so that they can have the 12 that they normally do. I think more and more people would do that, right? It's hard to dispute that. And so that's been my beef with cable companies, and the beef really across the board is that you're forced into buying these big packages that you don't really want and paying a ton of money for them. And these streaming solutions are coming along and really turning that on its head and giving people a new alternative. And I think that's why you see so many people flocking to them. It's a very simple equation.
Right. And it's odd. I mean, you brought up how music went through this, through the late 90s and early 2000s. And video kind of doesn't want to have that happen to them again. Like they don't want somebody like Apple to come in and normalize the market for them. So they're going to all try and do it themselves. And for the most part, they've been able to kind of like stave off, the entire world getting something like Napster for video and downloading. Like I think everyone was using Napster for a while there, or services like it, to download MP3 music for free. And that certainly took a huge dent out of some CD sales and some artists' paycheck. But what they did end up figuring out is if you make this content available and put a price tag on it, most people will pay for it out of convenience, rather than like you said, it's kind of like the CD where you had the CD on it and you only wanted the one song off of it, the single, and you had to buy the whole stupid CD for $20 when it came out. Like it's kind of the same thing, right? Except on a much more painful scale every month, where you want the 3 channels that you want to watch, and then you end up having to pay for the entire package for $150 to $200. So
yeah,
it's
yep.
it's like the same thing. The same arguments are going on. The same things are happening. But I think the technology is all there that we'll be able to go ahead and move towards something that's more centric. And is it iTunes? Is it Apple? Is it Google? I don't know. Is it YouTube? I don't know. But I do think that eventually we're going to get really tired. Like Disney just announced they were pulling all their movies off of Netflix, and they're going to make their own ESPN app, and they're going to make their own what's it called? Disney like Vault app or whatever, where they have all their Disney shows and Pixar shows in there. So they're going to do that, and it's going to be like another $10 a month that we're going to subscribe to that for. Like eventually, I'm going to need a service that I pay for every month to figure out what services I'm paying for every month. Like it's going to be so bad, and we're back to where we started. So I'd really like to see. I'd really like to see something come in and just like aggregate everything together. I think Apple was trying to do that eventually, but all of the networks were like, no, we don't want you to do what you did to the music industry and make us profitable. Like they just kicked them to the curb. So, but
yeah.
I mean, Apple does have a large control over the music industry now, and they didn't want to give that up. And so now everybody is kind of like doing their own bifurcated thing where they're just like, we have our own app and it works over here. Use us. And I don't know. I really wish that we had something that was all in one place, so we could get to the future of TV rather than. I feel like I'm describing cable TV now. Like I wish everything was all in one place and I could just change to what channel I wanted to watch.
yeah, it is right.
Comes full circle.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're seeing is growing pains, right? Like. Actually a story on Fierce Cable this week about a platform that's 2 years old that I have to admit I had never heard of. Seeso, spelled SEESO, if you're listening and you haven't heard of it like me. And apparently this was NBC's, they had a streaming comedy subscription service that they had launched. $4 a month. They launched it back in January of 2016. I had to research this because none of this was in the original story that I read. Story sort of assumed that the reader had heard of it. Well, they're shuttering it. It's going away. And, there was some analysis that we'll post a link to again, HomeTech.fm/175. And this was an analyst from Barclays who was really faulting NBC for essentially what they were doing was just taking like linear TV programming, traditional TV programming, and sort of putting it online was his takeaway. And you can read some more of the details in this story, but the takeaway was that, to succeed with streaming video, you've got to think about it differently as a company than you do linear TV. It's a different model. It's got to be packaged differently, presented differently, priced differently, targeted to maybe a different consumer. There are a lot of sort of nuanced facets that you've got to think about. You can't just take the stuff that you're, farming out and putting on the big cable TV providers and put it on a website and charge $5 a month and expect people to pay it. You've got to actually add some value and do things a little bit differently. So it's a good read. I would encourage you if you're interested in this landscape. It's a short article, but it gets you thinking a little bit about this landscape. And to come full circle, Seth, to your point, you're going to see companies try different things. You're going to see companies like Disney, pull the plug on their relationship with Netflix and go try their own thing, and it may work and it may not. But eventually I think it's going to shake out, and what you're going to see in the future is a TV market that looks very different from the one we've known traditionally. And I think, like I said earlier, it's going to take some time. I think that the entrenched interests of traditional pay TV providers run very deep. They've got very deep pockets. A lot of people out there want to avoid the complication. That's another thing that I've talked about numerous times on this show is even for an enthusiast like me, it's confusing. The SVOD landscape is very confusing. You've really got to parse through it. So, there's just a ton of movement in this market, and it's really interesting to watch. There was a couple of stories. Richard in the chat room is alluding to them. Hulu added 12 more CBS stations this week. They're now up to 115 of them. Vudu Video, which is a company that's been around for a very, very long time. I think very few people have heard of them. I remember when they first came out.
I remember selling Vudu boxes. I mean,
they had hardware and I think that was back 2007, 2008. So they're still hanging on. They were bought by Walmart. Their streaming service is going to come to Apple TV on August 22nd. Richard's saying soon they'll, Amazon and Vudu on Apple TV soon. So, you're, again, seeing a lot of movement, a lot of evolution in this market. Consumer mindset is definitely starting to shift. And I think it'll be really fascinating to see what this market looks like when we sit down a year from today, and then 2 years from today, where are we going to be?
Yeah, and to complicate all of that is the net neutrality issues that have been coming up over the last couple of years and months, whichever. These massive companies that are content companies like Comcast and NBC, they're going to like say, oh, it's great. You want to use that Netflix or that Vudu service, but you're going to have to pay us some extra money somehow for that Netflix.
Or we're going to throttle the traffic, right?
Or we'll just make you get worse streaming videos. We're going to make that service less reliable, and there's nothing you can do about it because, that's the way they're probably going to roll. They say they're not going to, but who's going to trust a cable company at this point? So what are you going to do? All of this is shaping up to be very interesting. Cable companies are losing these, massive amounts of subscribers. This is big money, and they're paying and wanting to go over to these different app-based services, right? Which are all going to eventually have to pay some kind of tax or extra fee back to the cable company. So I don't know. I think that they're playing a couple of steps ahead of us because they know exactly what the market is going to end up like. All of this, coming together and coming to a head, it will be interesting. Like you said, we're going to have to look at this in a couple of years, maybe a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now. We're still doing this podcast 5 years from now. That'd be awesome, huh? We'll have to take a look at it and see where this all is. I mean, this is quickly changing, and there's so much moving here that it's really, really hard to even keep up with it. So that's kind of where we spend actually quite a bit on these. What would you call it? SVOD, I don't know about
SVOD.
We'll
find something. We'll find something that works eventually.
But yeah, it's why we spend so much time on it, just because there's just so much going on. It's really, really hard to keep up with.
Yeah. So tune into HomeTech.fm episode 432, and we'll see if our predictions are right.
I'm going to put that on our Trello board for episode 432.
All right. Well, that's a good note to wrap it up on. We'll move into our interview here. Again, we had the another installment of our project, and really great interview with Nathaniel Gori, and a guy again who's clearly done his homework and studied up on the smart home and charted a really nice path forward. And I really enjoyed it. We hope you do too. So without further ado, let's get started. Hey, Nathaniel, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. We're looking forward to the conversation, and sounds like you've got some really interesting perspectives here surrounding your project, and I think our listeners will really enjoy it. But before we dive right in and start talking about the technology, why don't you take an opportunity here to give a little personal introduction, maybe talk about some of your background and what your current interest is in the smart home.
Yeah, sure. My name's Nathaniel Gori, and I live just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, with my wife Allison. We used to live in New York City in a little apartment, and then moved back to our home state a few years ago and bought our first house, which is about 2,000 square feet and about 100 years old. So nothing's straight, nothing's new, everything's kind of out of whack. I am not a home automation or professional by trade. I'm actually a financial person, but I'm the kind of the guy among my friends and family who everyone turns to for, a TV recommendation or what to buy, appliances, you name it, anything, they turn to me. So always had an interest in the space. So, and now that I have our own house, we've been playing around for a little while.
Awesome. It sounds like the house presented some very unique challenges, and you alluded to a couple of them there very briefly. A very old house, and that you got a lot of people listening to the show right now who have either owned one of those or have worked in one, and
right.
You can just say it's a really old house, and they know exactly what you're talking about. But give us the quick summary. What were some of the particular challenges that your installation there in that older home presented?
Sure. So when we first moved in, our breaker panel was maxed out. We had a 60 amp service. So right off the bat, we had an electrician in pulling in new service and pulling some new wire, replacing some of the fabric and the metal cladded Romex. And then light switches in our house made no sense. So, a light switch when you enter a room would be across, or there would be no three-way, or all sorts of strange things. So we took the opportunity to kind of hit the electrical and the lighting first, right after we moved in. We didn't do a full gut renovation, I think, like your previous guest. So didn't have the luxury of doing kind of new wiring and new switches everywhere. But my electrician is a Lutron installer, so we actually started off with Caseta, which is about the right size for our house and our needs. So, and I helped him for the span of the week that he was here working. So I learned a lot about how the system works and setting it up and some other stuff from him, and we've kind of grown from there. But that's really where we started, was with the Lutron and the Caseta.
Very, very cool. That sounds very familiar too. Like everything you described. Sounds pretty familiar. We moved into our house about 2 years ago, and it was built in 1969, and basically no one touched it since then. Like there were some minor things done, like it did get repiped and a couple of like really core infrastructure things that kind of had to happen along the way, but roofs and that kind of thing. But like the electrical had not been touched since 1969, and the same lady and their family had lived there, and she was the last one. When she moved out, there was like a time capsule, So a house that's over 100 years old, I imagine that you had some pretty distinct challenges in trying to figure out where light switches went and that kind of thing, because in that amount of time, you have many people come into the house and kind of hook things up the way they think should be hooked up and along those lines. What was your primary? I'm curious. What was your primary choice for the Lutron Caseta product? Was it the look and feel, or was it just your electrician recommended it?
It was a combination of not wanting to pull new wires and open walls in a lot of spots. So the wireless component, right, for three-way switching. So replace an existing switch that made no sense with a dimmer, and then put a Pico kind of on the wall where it does make sense, and then to be able to control it all together, from a phone or from a tablet or what have you. My wife, she's more on the, she's not like your previous guest, like a true interior designer, but she has a very design bend to her job. So making it look right was also part of the challenge. So
sure, yeah.
It looks like a standard switch for the most part, just a few more buttons, but she's comfortable with it, and she doesn't have to like play around with any strange settings or swipes or weird. I when I first was planning out before we'd actually bought the house, I didn't know what we were dealing with wiring. I was thinking fancy Z-Wave switches and maybe a panel on the wall, like touchscreen. No, none of that. So then none of that was going to happen in our house. So yeah, quickly pivoted, and Caseta was kind of the right play for us. And then the more I dug into it, I found some kind of interesting extensions that could help us and sort of the other goals we had with where we were headed. So I think I mentioned to you guys, we have a SmartThings set up, but we're really only using the SmartThings and a Raspberry Pi, running a specialized Python script written by a nice gentleman named Nate Schwartz that lets you use a Pico to control any Z-Wave device, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So you don't have to, have a specialized Z-Wave remote. You can kind of do anything you want with a Pico, which is pretty neat. So we're looking to use that for like fan controls for ceiling fans down the road here. So we can have Picos that would do, speed 1, speed 2, speed 3, and just this little script runs on your Raspberry Pi, and then sits in between. You need a Pro Caseta hub and just a SmartThings hub, and it can do the interpretation and just be the bridge, which is kind of cool. Right. And it's very fast. Yeah.
Right, because the Pro one is the one that you need to have to do like external integrations. They have two versions. Yeah, I think it's $50.
It has a telnet. Yeah, definitely worth it. Definitely, if you have any kind of aspirations of doing anything advanced, you need that. So I actually started with the basic one and quickly returned and got the Pro one. So that's my 2 cents there. But it's a very cool integration.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I hope one day we see Lutron Caseta come out with some fan speed control type devices. The higher end stuff like the Radio Raw and of course their Q QS line stuff all has that. But
Yeah.
the Caseta is basic, and I understand what they're doing there. But I hope one day we get to see that. It's really cool that you found a solution in the interim. I do want to mention you brought up this a couple of times, episode 172 that we talked with David Millsaps, and then I think there was another project way before that where we talked to Rob Lombardo. We'll put a link to those in the show notes over at HomeTech.fm/175 if anybody's interested in listening back and hearing what you're talking about there. But one thing you did mention, or one thing that is in those episodes that I think you may want to talk about here is, how did you go about planning for your project here? What were your first steps? Was it like, holy cow, we've got this house to do, and you're just kind of like plugging away at stuff along the way? Or did you kind of have like a couple of goals in mind when you first started?
Yeah, so we looked at kind of the core systems of our house, and we actually had new heating, so we were very lucky that was already done. But electrical was definitely first, and then along with the electrical went lighting, and then we kind of I grouped kind of the other areas. So networking, some home automation, and security were kind of the next ones we were focused on. And then we haven't quite gotten there, but down the road, sort of security and locks, entry, cameras, that type of stuff will be kind of the next phase for us. But in terms of like how I really delve deep and try to make my own matrix, I think similar to the way David did. So I tried to like map every kind of solution I could find out there in terms of pros, cons, and costs, and what information I could find about it, how it might work, and then trying to anticipate future integrations that may or may not happen, similar to what he was doing. So trying to make a best guess of like, oh, well, maybe Lutron will integrate with something down the road on the Caseta product. And then I really heavily used a bunch of different tools too, which I think helped me. I'm a heavy Evernote user, but also Trello, which is like a task management board. So we have a big
Trello.
Yeah, so I have a big board for the house, not just home automation type projects, but like everything by room. And then the home automation ones are color coded, and then we prioritize based off that and kind of, all right, well, I think I told you guys in another email, like our fridge died. So that kind of put a stop to other projects, and we had to buy new appliances. So that got bumped up the prioritization queue, and that really helped out a bunch. And then there's an interesting website. I think it's smarthome.db. I think that's one it is. It's kind of does some of what I'm talking about. It tries to, give you like, I buy this product. It integrates with these other, this Nest thing integrates with Smart Things or, Vera or whatever the case may be. Tries to lay out the connections for you. But I found it doesn't necessarily go deep enough. So you have to do your own forum digging and kind of poking around, figure out it yourself. So, and then I actually used Visio to make like a simple map of how everything was going to just connect it, hopefully at some point down the road when everything's all tied together. So kind of the end stage, what it should look like, hopefully, by floor.
Yeah. Well, I love that Smart Home DB. I've heard of that before, and I haven't dug into it. I think it's a very, very smart idea. It's a common theme, that we're all of us with any sort of involvement in the smart home are constantly having to think about and sort of look into our crystal balls and project about what's going to work with what in the future. And it's just the unfortunate reality. And frankly, I don't know if that's ever going to change. But, I do think with a little bit of critical thought, like you've clearly given to it, that you can mitigate a lot of the biggest issues that come with that by making, product decisions based on companies that have a sort of a track record of compatibility. And it sounds like you've certainly done a good job. And I think Seth had to probably laugh to himself a little bit when you said Trello, because it's sort of a running joke here on the show. We use Trello, and there's probably a lot of listeners right now who know how much we rave about that. It's such a flexible tool, but we won't go there. We've got a smart home to discuss right now. So let's move on. I know one of the interesting products that I saw when you initially submitted your entry here was the Sense Energy Monitor. And in fact, we've had a couple of people over the last, maybe 6 to 8 months write in sort of inquiring about this product, and we haven't dug into it yet, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Give us the general overview in case, there's anybody out there who hasn't heard of it or isn't familiar with it. And then just give us your general sense, some of the likes, dislikes, how did it install, that sort of thing.
Sure, yeah. It's a smart home energy monitor. It's a little different than some of the other products out on the market, where you install a small little box in the bottom of your electrical panel and then 2 clamps on the mains. We actually have a sub panel, but it's able to monitor both the main panel and the sub panel from just the 2 sets of clamps. And then it's actually doing very high sampling, almost 1 million times a second, is my understanding, and then using some machine learning to actually identify the different devices in your house just based on the phase and the pole and the draw and the different components. So like it can isolate, for example, the compressor on our refrigerator, so when that's on, because it has a unique signature. It has a big spike when it first ramps up and then it drops down. And I think we're up to, it's learned, and it just learns over time, different devices, and you train it a little bit. You tell it, yes, this is a coffee maker, this is a vacuum, this is an oven, what have you. And then you can have the ability to actually trigger IFTTT recipes. So, for example, our washing machine and dryer on there, and it can change the color of a light bulb or blink a light bulb when the dryer turns off. So upstairs that your washing machine's done, which is a pretty cool feature. It's not perfect by any means. So there's a lot of people. It's essentially a beta product that they've released in the market. So it's kind of growing pains with it, but I think it's got a pretty cool future. I know they want to work on like predictive failure. I mentioned our refrigerator died a few weeks ago now. So they want to get to the point where they can tell you when that's going to happen, like your motor cycling at a different pace or your boiler's doing something or what have you, and give you an early warning, which I think would be a really cool feature. And then you can also do comparisons among their user group, so you can see like what your idle draw is in your house against like the typical average user for them. So ours is like 165 watts, which is pretty good compared to like 300, I think, is their average home. So install, back to that, I guess, for a second. They recommend an electrician. I braved it and did it myself, which is kind of hard because you have to turn off the main in the dark and then install a new breaker. But if you're comfortable working in a panel, it should be doable kind of in a half hour probably.
Very cool. Very cool. It sounds like a really neat product, and I think one that Seth and I will have to dig into and see if maybe we can get them on the show. I'd love to I'd love to learn a little more about it.
I think they're actually Massachusetts based as well. I think they're MIT Cambridge. Yeah, that's where they're. Yep. Yeah.
They were featured on This Old House, so I hope so.
They were. Yeah. There you go.
Yep. Exactly.
Very cool. Well, let's move along here. We a number of systems that you've put into the house. You alluded to it earlier, and I was curious personally to know what you're using for networking. That's a very vital component of the, a foundational element of the smart home. And so what did you decide to standardize on for your networking hardware?
So we have FiOS in our house, and then we have a full Ubiquity setup. So Ubiquity,
very cool.
Ubiquity Edge router, and then Ubiquity access points, the Pro series. So we have very good Wi-Fi, no problems whatsoever. All running through like a big gigabit switch. So we actually don't have any physical Ethernet, which is kind of a next phase project for us. But Wi-Fi is pretty strong around our house, so we don't really have a problem for the most part. But yeah, it's we never had a problem. It's just super strong uptime and just keeps chugging along once you get it going. It's a little difficult on the setup if you're not like a networking professional, but once you get it going, it's pretty great stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of Ubiquity and have the what's the little router in my house, the Edge router PoE version, and I use the Amplify for Wi-Fi right now. So it's all been pretty good. You mentioned earlier about doing a security system. Do you I don't want to ask, I guess, how do I ask this?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. We had, when we bought the house, it had an ADT system.
Okay.
Which we weren't really interested in using or paying for. But we did want a monitored security system where we are, because we're not home a lot of the time. We go away and what have you. So Qualsys actually was coming out with a new panel, which is an Alarm.com integrated panel. So it took a long time to get, but we have the new version 2 of that panel, which is essentially like a tablet. And we use that. It actually has its own Z-Wave controller, which is our primary Z-Wave controller. So, and we use it as actually a scene controller. So this goes to kind of how I simplified for my wife as well. So we only really run 4 scenes. So you're either at home, and we're here and awake, we're away, so like at work or whatever, or we're asleep, or we just wake up, which is like, light the way to the coffee and disable the alarm in the morning. So just those 4 scenes control like the garage and the sensors and eventually the door lock and what have you. So having it as the primary Z-Wave controller actually lets it have those devices monitored and controllable basically anywhere for us through the Alarm.com service.
And you're using the scenes through Alarm.com, right? When you say scenes, they're through Alarm.com. Okay,
through Alarm.com scenes. Yep. So it's doing arming, disarming, sensors, closing garage door, door lock, open, close type of stuff. So we really like it. It's an easy setup for anyone who's probably listening to this show. And it's the new hardware is pretty cool too. It's got like an integrated glass break sensor into the panel, and it's a nice piece of hardware. We did have one hiccup with it with my wife, one of those moments where we had a severe weather alert and I had those enabled. And when she came home, she couldn't disable the severe weather alert and the alarm started going off. She was not very thrilled. So definitely had to disable those after that event.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a convenient thing, but it's even more convenient when you need to disarm the system and it's not letting you. So.
That was. I think that's a bug they have to work out on the firmware. But and like in the event there is an alarm, it integrates with Lutron, so it can turn on all the lights in the house like automatically. So which is kind of cool as well. So
nice. Yeah, that's right, because Lutron does integrate with Alarm.com as well. So,
cloud to cloud. Yep, exactly.
Very nice. Well, there is a couple notes here about audio video, and see which direction you made mention of doing like speakers or wanting to do speakers in the house. Let's talk a little bit about your AV needs and what you ended up doing.
So I actually, from New York, we had a large Samsung, kind of the best plasma back in the day, which didn't fit. We actually, our living room requires us to mount the TV over the fireplace, which is not ideal, but just where it has to go.
Yep.
And it wouldn't fit. So I ended up buying a new LG OLED to go over the fireplace that would fit. And then I actually had a TiVo back in college, and I was able to get TiVo to somehow honor my lifetime subscription and get me a Bolt for a really great price with lifetime. So we are now a TiVo family again. So we use TiVo with TiVo Minis for distribution throughout the house. We currently don't have any of my home theater hooked up, just kind of sitting around idle at the moment. But the idea is to get everything consolidated down into a big 48U rack we have in the basement, which is kind of empty at the moment, and then have everything fed up and into our main living space for sort of home theater. And then started investigating kind of the whole home audio. We have a few Echoes throughout the house, which we just kind of use sporadically for music. But the idea would be to do Sonos Connects with a distribution amplifier and then have different zones like throughout the house down the road. So when we find the time and to actually get to it. So, but yeah, I think David, your previous guest, had a similar kind of setup with a distribution amp and multiple Connects running. It's just to have the Sonos interface and connections. That's the plan.
Got it. Cool. Well, I know in your note, in your notes that you submitted, you did make a brief mention, I believe, of doing a little bit of voice control in the home. What voice control platform are you using, and talk about some of your general impressions there?
Yeah, it's just Alexa. We have one in the kitchen, and then one up in our bedroom, and then another one in a spare bedroom. And I mean, I basically only use it to turn on the lights if I forget or turn them off, like when we're leaving the house, just tell her I won't use her name, to turn off stuff and maybe turn on stuff when we come home if nothing's on for some reason. But it's very, very light. We don't really use it for anything else, to be honest. It's more for music and kind of like news and like shopping to add stuff to our grocery list or whatever. But we're not using it from a pure integration standpoint or control standpoint.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Okay, cool. Makes sense. One thing I definitely did want to touch on, this sounded very interesting when I read about it, is it sounds like you did a little bit of a custom project out in the garage. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So we have a detached garage with a electric garage door opener. And we wanted a switch, simple, just wall switch, not the ugly gray remote Velcro to the wall inside the house, so we could close the garage door before we got a Z-Wave garage door opener. So I searched high and low, and there's nothing out there. So I ended up taking apart a spare remote and taking a multimeter to it and then soldering it on to a momentary, like a garbage disposal switch, a Leviton garbage disposal switch. So it sits behind the wall. You can't tell that there's a remote there, and you just toggle it like just a regular light switch, and it opens and closes the garage door. So my wife was happy about that one for sure. So don't have to have like a garage door opener out on the counter all the time, just to be able to close the garage from the kitchen.
Right. Well, you mentioned it just there, and we alluded to it one time before. Your wife, this is another common theme that we've heard on our project episodes, and also again a lot of professionals in the audience who are very familiar with the wife acceptance factor or maybe the spouse acceptance factor to take it one step further. So what would you say is some of the biggest challenges that you faced in terms of sort of imposing your technology wants upon your spouse?
First is to not impose it upon her. So,
good answer.
She's actually very technical, but she doesn't really care to be. So I kind of have to sell her on some of the features at home. What this will do for us, and then try to keep just everything as simple as possible. So like on the panel, those four alarm.com scenes, and then we have a couple Lutron scenes for like TV or what have you. And at first she didn't see the benefit of some of this stuff, but now she's the first one to whip out her phone and dim the lights for the TV and or check on the status of like the Nest when we're not home or whatever. So mostly simplification, and then just getting her buy-in up front on what I'm thinking and why it would help, and she generally goes along with it. I've had as long as it's not too complicated, she's totally fine with it. But the initial sell, she's sometimes difficult for sure.
Well,
so.
Besides this extremely extremely valuable lesson that you've learned here about getting buy-in on everything. What is the biggest or maybe the most unexpected lesson you learned when putting together your smart home setup?
Everything takes a lot longer to actually do yourself than you think it's going to take. So much longer, and probably costs a lot more than you think it's going to cost as well. So we've been here a little over a year now, and we're still doing some of the stuff I thought we would have had done 3-4 months in. So just takes time, and it's hard with a new house to you and trying to do it on your own without professional help. It's just after work, weekends, and what have you. It's just getting time, and then trying to deal with all those like weird troubleshooting, things in the middle of the project, just disrupt where you want to get to, slow down your plans. So they're inevitable though.
Oh, you mean you don't just plug it in and it just works right away?
No, definitely not. A lot of returns, and we're like, this light bulb blinks with this dimmer, and I have to return it, or I bought the wrong hub, or I've probably gone through 3 or 4 hubs, I think, at this point, just trying different things to see how they worked, how we like the interface. Lots of trial and error.
Interesting.
Too.
Yeah, I don't know this directly or empirically, but I've heard a lot of anecdotal sort of evidence that manufacturers are struggling with that. There's the amount of returns and things that they have to deal with. Selling direct into the consumer market is a big challenge, and obviously we're looking at it here from the other end of that spectrum. But there's no doubt. I mean, there are a lot of landmines, proverbial landmines there when you set out to do this, and that goes for the do-it-yourself or even the professional. The pros deal with that same sort of thing all the time. Maybe to a little bit lesser of an extent, just because they've learned those lessons the hard way already. But it's a real challenge. So anyways, Nathaniel, we're running up against our time here, so we want to thank you again for coming on. I really enjoyed learning about the system, and we'd love to hear from you in the future as you move forward and start to implement some of these other systems, and maybe the home evolves a little bit. Definitely keep us posted. But if there's anybody listening who did want to connect with you, I don't know are you active on Twitter or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's just Nathaniel, Nathaniel Gori. That's my handle, and you can reach out to me there. I mostly use it as information gathering, kind of following what's going on, but feel free to send me a message, and happy to give you any info I can on anything we talked about.
Sure. Yep. All right. Well, like I said, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share some of your hard-earned lessons there in the smart home, and we wish you all the best of luck moving forward.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.